Hey, this is Arthur Hardy with the Mardi Gras Guide. I'm on with Tina and Jeff for Fleurs Truly.
Live from New Orleans, home of good food, good music, and tons of fun, this is Tina and Jeff with Fleurs Truly. Hello, Jeff. How are you this week? Happy Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday already?
Yes,
I feel like
Tuesday
that just
already.
passed.
A very special, exciting Tuesday. We have a wonderful, fabulous guest with us in front of the show, Mike Detillier. Hey, Mike, tell all our listeners hello.
Hello. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's safe. Some rough weather passed this afternoon, so we good. But wow, that was some weather.
Yes, welcome back to Fleurs Truly.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're so excited to have you on. I know we're right a little over 2 weeks to the draft. Your draft guide just came out, and I know a lot of people are excited to get that. You can tell everybody where they can pick up a copy online.
They can go on to MikeDetillier.com and get it there. And so we'll have it out. We had 3 big mailings: Friday, Saturday, Monday. And so we got every book out. And, so you order it and we ship it out that day.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are excited. I was seeing a couple posts on Saints Report about them getting their copies. Everybody's really excited. It's just, off season's rough for us Saints fans. Are rough for NFL fans at all. So with the draft coming up and this being such an interesting draft, because we really don't know what's going to happen. So I want to kind of pick your brain on that and see what you think the Saints are going to do. I mean, Drew Brees retired and we have Taysom and Jameis under contract. But I mean, what are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen with them? They either going to trade up, trade back, quarterback? What do you think is going to what we're looking at here?
Sean's had a history of trading up for, to get a certain player. But this year is a little bit different because of the fact that, the salary cap sort of weeded out some of the veteran players that you had on your team and is sort of disturbed a little bit of the depth that you had, not only as starters, but also depth. And so I think he keeps the pick at 28. I really do. I think he keeps that selection. It's going to be interesting because if you stay there, you don't control the draft. The draft controls you picking that late. And so it's, for me, their biggest needs are on defense. Cornerback, number 1 priority. Number 2 would be linebacker. Other than Demario Davis, do you have anybody that you really can say for sure? Now, you did pick Zach Bond, and certainly he gives you some potential there, but you hope to bring back Quan maybe, but he's coming off the Achilles injury, so linebackers there. Defensive tackle. That's a major loss with Malcolm Brown. Malcolm was terrific against the run. Don't give me this stuff about, the young kids are going to step up. No, they're rotation guys. You need a starter there. So for me, early on, it's all about kind of solidifying your defense. And you need multiple players at corner. You don't just need a rookie there. You also need to bring in a veteran. And so I think it's going to be more defensive oriented, but we do know Coach Payton. And he loves offensive players.
Yes, he likes shiny new toys. He does like his shiny new toys. We always say that.
Right. I mean, come on. We all like presents. We all like presents. So I get it. And somewhere in this draft, he's going to pick a quarterback. I think somewhere in this draft, he's going to pick a running back. Somewhere in this draft, he's going to pick a wide receiver. So looking at it early on, if you're just looking at needs, it would be cornerback, linebacker, defensive tackle for me. 1, 2, 3.
And I agree. I saw your tweet about Quan. Saints fans were really disappointed when they didn't re-sign him. I saw him working out. You feel like I do. I want him back with the Saints. I think he was a great player. He was an asset. We need him. It's just a matter of, can he come back from that injury? That's a tough injury. Some players do and some don't. So I'm hoping.
It was at one time, Tina, a career ender. Not anymore. That's the people ask me about the biggest change in maybe the last 10 years. And I always tell them medical, knee injuries, ankle injuries, Achilles, shoulder, hip injuries that were career threatening. Today you can come back from. It's amazing. The technology is so far ahead in the medical field that I guess it happens so fast. We don't pay a lot of attention to it, but I do to see, and being involved with Thibodeau Regional Medical Center and their process of rehab and rehabilitation. You get athletes that they come in here, their career's over. Today, they back up and running and lifting weights and doing everything within a few weeks to months. It's amazing to me how we've progressed so much in the medical field. And not to get into other things, but look at what we went through with COVID. And in years past, for you to come up with a shot would have taken years to do. And that came about within a year. So it's amazing how technology and medicine have swung together. And it's the biggest change in sports that I've seen in my 36 years covering.
Well, Saints fans remember Billy Miller tore his Achilles the 2009 season in preseason. And I mean, he never really recovered 100% from that. I mean, he went on to another team after the Saints, but I mean, he struggled with that for a while afterwards. So you're talking what, 11 years ago. So, I mean, big
look
change.
How quickly we saw Ray Lewis come back from injuries. Terrell Suggs comes back within the same year of what would have knocked them out maybe for an entire season. So that part is there, and it's amazing. The technology in the medical world, how they have kind of blended this together, and it has been a godsend for sports, definitely. And also people in the outside world, also not just the sports world, but the outside world. And as you get a little bit older and things sort of break down on you. Years ago, if you'd have told somebody, oh, somebody's going through a knee replacement or a hip replacement, they'd have said, oh my Lord, a hip replacement, a knee replacement? Today, it's routine. Heart surgery today, it's routine.
And so many of those are outpatient now, things that used to be a week stay in the hospital is an outpatient surgery.
And sometimes I think what throws you off is somebody who's had a chronic position with certain things, and then all of a sudden it hits them major. And so, and you see that sometimes, even with young people, not realizing genetically you can't change your genetics. There's no way. And so those sort of things still happen. But today, to go through heart surgery and to go through knee replacement, hip replacement, it is amazing. And they got you up. And you're not laying in no bed for a long time. You up and rolling. It's really been great for everyone, but it certainly affected the sports world.
I gotta, we talk about the needs that have come up, and some needs we haven't had to fill because you talk about the medical advances we've been through and the way that we've been able to progress that way. But draft day always has that sense of the unexpected, and it's something that I know that we've seen over the years. From number one, we've been a team that's been take the best player available at times. We've seen the team make moves that were unexpected, whether it was to move up or move down or make some type of trade that may have been surprising. In that first round this year, do you see the Saints as being a team that may try to make a splash early on, or do you see this as a more standard style drafting play for Coach Payton?
I think it would depend on how the draft sort of formulates, because I think for all coaches, they will never admit it, but I'll tell you, they fall in love with a player, a certain player that I want. Remember a few years back, it was Brandon Cooks. And Coach Payton wanted Brandon Cooks, traded up to go get it. Last year, we got word sort of around draft time as it started that Ruiz was the guy that Coach Payton really wanted, and they were able to get him. So no matter what, there is certain favorites for coaches. And so what happens if a guy that you've got ranked 16th and he falls to 24 or 23 and you say, I got to do something to get him. He's fallen too far for me. And so you make that move to get him. And so that wouldn't surprise me at all. We saw last year, and it was something I thought would happen, that he'd maneuver around early in the draft. And he did to get, Bond and Troutman. He sort of swung certain things deal-wise to do it. So Sean's always been aggressive at draft time. It's a little different this year because of the fact that the salary cap has affected maybe not the core of your football team, your depth, because for 3 years you sort of all chips in. Hey, we're going to spend what we got to spend, and we're going to try to get all this quality depth. I think you're going to see a younger football team for the Saints in 2021 because, if you hit in the draft, it's football minimum wage. Okay. You don't have to pay them a ton of money for a couple years until the salary cap is going to go back up. And we know within a couple years, because of the new TV contract, that's going to happen. It's going to be on the high rise and fast. So if you can get out the next couple years, then you sort of back to normal again. But I think for me, I would want more draft picks in this draft class than less.
Well, so especially with the Saints who have hit the lottery, especially in late round draft picks, things that they were able to pick up for not a whole lot of outlay. But the question becomes, is this focus this year, and we're starting at the draft calendar, is this the rebuilding year, or is this we're going to try to roll the dice a bit and see where this team is and see if there is an avenue to go right back to the top of the class?
It's not a rebuild, it's a reload. And there's a little bit of a difference because you kept your core in place. You kept your core players in place. Did it cost you Malcolm and Jenkins? Yes. You knew because of the money that with Morstead, it was just a matter of time before that was going to occur. We all knew the truth that he was going to leave after this year. That's not a shock. Jared Cook leaving, he was a disappointment for this football team at tight end. Mm-hmm. And so, but, most of the other players are still here. Anzalone, it was keeping him healthy. You just couldn't keep him healthy throughout his time frame here. So, and I look back, Justin Hardy.
I think he was one of the biggest losses.
How big of a loss that was.
Huge loss.
Because he was a guy, when he came in here, he was just learning how to play defensive back. He had been a wide receiver at Illinois, but he was a great special teams player. So you're going to miss that part. But so how do you feel that? You fill it with younger players, and you fill it via the draft. And that's why in this draft class, I'd want more than less because I had to get rid of some veteran depth that I really wanted to keep, but I can't financially. I got to keep my core.
And Mickey is great with moving the numbers, but a lot of Saints fans, they were so frustrated. And I saw the replies on Saints Twitter about, losing these players, but they don't understand how the cap works. He can only do so much. And he restructured a lot of contracts already, but you can't pay everybody. Maybe a lot of big players with big contracts, and we were going to lose some of them. And honestly, a lot of people out there were saying they were surprised we didn't lose more. But I feel like I don't think it's a rebuild. I think it's a regroup time where, we got a lot of young guys, a lot of talent. This draft, this is from a listener actually that wants to ask you this. J.C. Horn, you mentioned cornerback is a position that we're in need for. J.C. Horn, we all know who his dad was. And he's one of the big prospects in draft class. Do you think that we could see him in the black and gold? That's what somebody wanted me to ask you about him. There's been a lot of talk about JC and his dad, and I was like, well, I said I can't really say. I said because we don't know. There's this whole joke about Sean drafting LSU players. I was like, okay, we don't say JC's a legacy, but his dad played for the Saints, and Joe was with the team a year when Sean took over, and then he went on. But we don't know. You never know what's going to happen on draft day. There's always surprises, like Jeff mentioned.
I do know this.
Big splash.
Tina, I do know this. J.C. Horn will never last to where the Saints pick in round 1. To get him, you're going to have to move up and move high to get him. That's bottom line. Other than the medical, it's now become, how do you match up downfield? All these receivers. Last year was the best wide receiver class I ever did. 35 years last year. In 36 years this year, this receiver class can get in the ring with that 2020 draft class of receivers. It's really good. The difference is I thought 2020 was a faster group of receivers. This year, it's a bigger, taller, lengthier group of receivers. So how do you match up? So that's what makes cornerback a premium to get. And so Patrick Surtain, he's going to be the first one off the board. Then most likely J.C. Horn. The medicals.
Top 3. That's what I said. The top 3. And I knew and the Saints are not going to trade up. They're not for him. It would be a quarterback if that was to happen. And that's a very big if.
And Caleb Farley, it's going to be a medical because he had recent back surgery. So it's going to be a medical on him. I wrote an article back in January of the 3 players I thought, once the Saints got knocked out, that I thought could be there when they select. And my 3 players were Greg Newsome, the second from Northwestern, cornerback, Zaven Collins, the linebacker from Tulsa, and Tyson Campbell, the cornerback from Georgia. I had so many people say, man, I ain't never even heard of no Greg Newsome. Who is Greg Newsome? Now, every time I hit, the internet, they got articles written about Greg Newsome. So he must have somehow got in their frame real quickly. But I watched Greg. I actually saw him at IMG Academy in Florida. He's a kid from right outside of Chicago, went to IMG, went back because he signed with Northwestern. Really good football player, good sized player. He's played in man, zone, off coverage. Now, here's the thing. They got all these breakdown geniuses today with this. Here's my deal I want to explain. Greg Newsome is not calling the defense. Okay? Neither is J.C. Horn. Neither is Surtain. They're playing the defense that the coaches want them to play. So for somebody to be negative, oh, well, he only played this at this particular time. No, you got to understand that's what the coaches want him to do. It's not what he wants to do. So Newsome's a guy that I really like. Very smart. Listen, you're not getting into Northwestern College, in Illinois with an expired driver's license. I try to tell this to Abear. It's not like getting into Northwestern State. I always tease him about that, there's a difference there. Northwestern, he's a real smart player, and I think he's got some great growth potential as a football player. And so I'd love to see him there when the Saints pick, but if he's not there, to me, Zaven Collins, the linebacker from Tulsa, would be a tremendous football player. I actually scouted him for a college when he was in high school. He was the punter, kicker, quarterback, receiver, played flex tight end, safety, and linebacker in high school. Wow. All across the board. Wow. So, man, you talk about an athlete. He's an athlete. And he has gotten much, much better at that
Jason
linebacker.
Hill 2.0.
Yeah, and so, the thing about it, that he did all of this, he wasn't a super highly recruited football player. He was sort of a middle-range guy. He ends up at Tulsa, but it all worked out for him. Tyson Campbell is a guy I think could sneak into round 1. He went to American Enterprise College, high school in Florida. He was coached by Patrick Surtain. Now, Patrick, I'm getting old in this business. I saw Patrick play at Edna Carr. First time I saw him play, and I always tell him this, it was basketball. And then he became a great football player at Southern Miss with the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and his, so in one secondary, he had his son on one side and Campbell on the other. And I will say this about Tyson. He has not played up to it. He's been a bit erratic, but he's the best athlete of all the cornerbacks in this draft class. The best athletically. He has not been able to kind of click the switch to be the most productive guy, but size, speed, recovery ability, that ability to kind of twist and run with the receiver. He's got all of it. There's some mechanics he needs to work on. So I look back in January, the same three I thought of then, I think of today as being those type players that when you pick late in round one could be there. The other guy I gave a lot of consideration to, actually had a mock draft that I almost went with because I had Newsome and Collins off the board. I went with the best player available. And that guy was Elijah Moore, the wide receiver from Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. Almost went with it. I had it in my hand because I liked the way the setup was. But I went with another deal, and I decided to go with Greg Newsome instead. But Elijah Moore would be a great pickup for this football team. Can play in the slot, can play out wide. He can return punts and kicks, run the jet sweeps, reverse plays. He was tremendous last year for Ole Miss and what Lane was doing offensively. And so it gives you another weapon for Winston. It doesn't solve your defensive woes, so to speak, that you've got open, but it certainly gives you another big play weapon. So, those three guys, though, Campbell, Newsome, Collins, I thought in January, and I still think that today. Here we are in April.
Right. Well, in terms of the draft as a whole, we always have that other player who is highly rated. It's always expected to go in the first 10 picks and then just falls down the board for whatever reason. Is there a player you see that does that may be really high on most of the draft boards right now, but that could end up in that late first round and being a guy that the Saints could jump on that maybe to most people seems out of reach right now?
I think it would be Farley because of the injury. Because, for me, he was a certain top 10 pick. And then he has the back issues. And he recently had surgery on it. So he comes right out of surgery and he runs a sub 4.3 40-yard dash. So it didn't hurt his running any. That's all I can tell you. But the physical contact that you're going to have. And my thing about it today is defenses today are smaller today than in the last 25 years. The reasoning is, okay, I spread you out. I got 3 wide receivers and a flex tight end. I can't play a base defense. I've got to match. So I take out a linebacker and I put a corner. I take out another linebacker. I put a safety. So here's my deal with all that. While you mixing and matching, and Brian Flores was at our Louisiana line camp. And, when you get about 120 coaches in a room, they got a lot of testosterone going on in there, and everybody's king of the hill. But everybody's talking about how are we going to adjust to the RPO system? How are we going to adjust to being spread out? And Brian got on a chair and said, listen, I'm going to ask y'all something. How do we adjust when we go and take out 2 bigger players and pick 2 smaller guys to take their place? How are we going to stop the run? Okay, I can play bully ball with you. I can run that big back. And so you better have the cornerbacks that can tackle. And so I think that's the concern with Caleb. How will it affect his tackling, his open field tackling? Because today it is high priority that if you pick in a defensive back, he has got to tackle. he can't just be a cover guy because of the way defenses are played today. And so Farley would be the guy, in my opinion, that could fall. The other one is Jalen Phillips, the defensive end from Miami of Florida, who put on a show last year for the Hurricanes. He was the most highly recruited defensive lineman in the country coming out of high school in California. Goes to UCLA, has 3 concussions in 1 season, quits football. Decides, he gets other opinions. Hey, you're going to be fine. He decides, I'm out of UCLA. I'm going play at Miami. And he was terrific last season for the Hurricanes. I think for some teams, those 3 concussions are in the back of their minds. Because if it wasn't there, he would be a top 15 pick. I think he slides into the 20s because of that. So it's not so much maybe looking at a certain position, it's medicals. How that guy is physically going to be. Listen, if I'm spending that much money on you as a first-round pick, I expect you to come in and play quickly. And the medical parts are going to have a concern with Phillips and going to have a concern certainly with Caleb Farley.
And it's funny you mentioned him because I literally just read an article about him yesterday and being on the Saints radar, and they were talking about his injury. And the thing is, I mean, Saints haven't been afraid to draft players with injuries like that before. They had that with Ryan Ramczyk in 2017, and they had that with Kakai in 2015. So, I mean, he's one of those, you know, he may come in and not be ready right at the start of camp, but I mean, there's a lot of reward in a player like him. If he was to, as Jeff, saying, being that player that's going to fall down to us and pick him up, right in that spot where we're like, okay, he's, top 3 at his position, and possibly without the injury would never even, have a chance to even be on our radar. Mm-hmm. So it's like I said, it's funny you mentioned that because I literally just read it and I was like, when you mentioned the name, I said, he's one of those guys we're going to have to kind of watch and see what happens. Because I know medical does scare a lot of players off. I mean, Drew Brees, case in point. I mean, look what happened with him. Miami would have took him, our history would have completely changed. But I mean, the Saints, they've drafted players before with injuries and had surgery, and, it's worked out. They just can't.
I think what a lot of times, Tina, people don't consider the fact that the doctors get heavily involved in this, and that, okay, I got to trust that doctor. He's giving me the best information he can at that time. And things can change, but at that moment, he's got to give me his honest opinion. I got to trust him if I'm a coach or a GM. And we all know who sort of controls things early for the Saints draft-wise. Come on, that's Coach Payton. He's got that type of stroke here. Mickey may have the final say, I get that, but it's Coach Payton. He likes things in certain players, and that's who he sort of targets a lot. And you look at how they set up the draft, and I've been told this by a few different people with the Saints. Okay, their scouts come up with all the grades, how they fit, everything else. They turn it over and they give it to Mickey and Sean. They rearrange the board. They put it priority, how they think that'll fit, how well it'll fit in the locker room. So the scouts do the legwork, and Jeff Ireland does the double check. But at the end, it's Mickey and Sean that set up the final board. Now, see, a lot of people, it's Jeff Ireland. It's Jeff Ireland. He is part of it. But at the end, it's Mickey Loomis and it's Sean Payton
and
that set up that final board, and they're basing it off the information of the scouts, Ireland, everybody else involved in the scouting situation. So I think for some Saints fans, you sort of believe that the scouting department and people, no, a lot of that, and listen, that's not unusual in this league, because I've heard it where general managers getting involved, head coaches getting involved, owners getting involved. Okay, Some owner, he don't have any idea what's going on. He comes in on draft day. Hey, I signed the checks. This is who I want. And it's happened here. Not under Mr. Benson, but it's happened here when John Mecom owned this team. He came in here, and for a couple drafts, I want this player and I want that player, and that's who they selected. Come on. You might say, oh, I tell my boss what I think, and I stand up to him. Okay, tell that to that multi-billionaire owner and see where you're going to be. Unemployed. Okay, that's just the way the NFL. A lot of this is worked out beforehand now, because the later the draft, when it was done in like late January, early February, you basically knew the GM was doing the selecting. But today, there's a lot of other et ceteras involved, where coaches, assistant coaches, general manager, and even some owners, not all of them, but some, get involved. That I want that player. My son went to high school with him, or my grandson knows him well. And it ends up being that. Some of the stories you hear, you sort of shake your head a little bit about. But, listen, after all the years that, when Mecom owned this team, nothing should surprise any Saints fan, if you live that long, to see what was happening here come draft day.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, when they fall in love with a player, all bets are off. They don't care. If there's someone there that they feel like, 2 or 3 spots they could move up and get, and is going to be, a day one starter, or someone that they see a lot of promise in, they're going to make it happen. And it goes against what all the analysts and the draft mock drafts, because the Saints have been known for that, at least in the last couple of years. There's been times where we picked a player and people were like, who? That happened last year, with the draft. Or it was like, who? What happened? I remember there was quite a few players that were still on the board when the Saints picked, and they thought it was going to go one way, and it didn't. So, we all know,
because they passed on an LSU player. Okay.
Well, the Saints don't draft LSU players, remember?
So I say that all the time. I took a shot last year with Patrick Queen because I thought he would be a good fit with this football team. And I knew I shouldn't have done it. I knew I shouldn't have done it. It just wasn't, for whatever reason or reasons, it's just not worked out. And they've had a few Louisiana-based players and LSU players on this team, but it's not been a lot. And, man, LSU has really gotten a big chunk of players into the National Football League. One of the guys, as a later round pick, and I'll throw his name out, is Puka Williams from Kansas, who went to high school at Hornville High School, right up the road from where I live. And Puka, he was breaking Gale Sayers' records at Kansas at running back. Now, you can break certain people's records, but when you break Sayers' records at Kansas, you're doing something. And Puka's not a real big running back, but he carried that Hornville football team on his back to the state championship game. Now, they lost, but he carried them there. And he was a terrific player at Kansas. And I just think he saw early in the season, I don't have a lot of talent around me. I'm making a business decision. I'm out of here. Les is gonna wear me out. And he made the decision to leave early. He opted out. He would be a great fit player for the Saints. You know why? Because he is so similar to Alvin Kamara in so many ways. And that if something happened to Alvin, I got a guy that can come in here. I don't have to change my playbook. Puka Williams can run those same plays. Great receiver coming out of the backfield. Can help you in the return game. He's elusive. He's fast. He's shifty. And so Sean likes that. And, he's scuffed a little bit. He's had some off the field issues. And he's scuffed a little bit. But Sean's willing to take a chance on a player. If he feels as though he won't be a distraction in the locker room, he'll take that chance. There was a lot of people that red flagged Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Not because of something he did, but because he was a talker. And he was a bit arrogant in some of the interviews. Well, for Sean, that's right up his alley. He don't care about none of that.
And we love him.
And hey, I would much rather have him on my side than play against him because he's an agitator. Okay. And I like that to a certain extent. I really do. Now, if it costs your team is one thing, but if you watch the final play when the Saints played in Atlanta, watch what happens in that game in the end zone. Calvin Ridley gets behind the first group of guys, and he doesn't even make a play on the ball. He goes after Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He doesn't even see the ball as it hits in the end zone because he is so aggravated with Chauncey. He went after him, so to speak, and paid no attention to where the ball was.
I have friends that ask me all the time, they're like, what does he say? And I'm like, we don't know. I'd love to get him on the show to talk about it. People always ask me that. Like, I don't know. I have no idea.
But some coaches don't. He should have been a second round pick in the draft. He ends up going very early in the fourth round. And I think for some coaches, they didn't like that element to him. I wouldn't bother me.
No,
one bit.
I feel like if you walk the walk, you can talk the talk, and he does.
And he can do it.
Yeah,
and he's a really good player too. See, because some guys can just talk it, but they're not real good. He can talk it, and he's a really good player.
Yes,
that there is a difference there. He's both.
I've heard that even though he can have the troubles at practice and things like that, that ultimately he's a team guy. He's a guy that is very much he can muster that spirit around him with the rest of the team, which I think is amazing.
He's definitely a motivator.
And it's a skill to get into other players' heads. It is something. I mean, we watch baseball players make a living out of this for years. And we know it happens in all of the sports. If you can get a guy mentally upside down, physically his skill set doesn't matter.
Look at the Chicago game. Okay, that was plays after he had agitated the Bears receiver who went after him. I mean, okay, if it would have happened right after, I get it. But it didn't. So that was on his mind for Weems the entire time, that he was aggravated with it. And so I would rather have that. Now, Puka's not that type talker, but he's a guy that has been scuffed a little bit. And I think he surprised a lot of people going to Kansas, going to watch one of the games. One of the guys I saw there on a Friday night was Nick Saban. Now, Puka didn't have quite the grades at that point to get in. And it would have been questionable. But Coach O was after him. Nick Saban was out. They had a ton of teams. Texas A&M, very interested. But he had some great issues. And then he certainly had the incident at Kansas. But I think he's a guy late in the draft. Okay, he is a hometown guy. Okay, you grew up in Hornville. Come on, you pretty close. And that he can have an impact, not necessarily as a starter, but as a guy that is the perfect fill-in. And I think today it's situational football in the NFL. Situational pass rushers, nickel, dime, defensive backs, everything specialized. And we're going into that world. I think Puka would be a great fit player for this football team as a later round pick.
And we saw the Saints do that with Will Clapp, and it helps to have that local guy on the team. He was such as much of a small role as he was really playing. He was a late round pick, and he ends up being kind of that hometown ambassador that's on the team. And so I think having that hometown guy is really something that's out there. But I got a question on the quarterback. We talked about the Saints will probably take a quarterback somewhere. Right. And I'd like to know really who you think that guy is, and ask you, because Sam Ehlinger is sitting out there pretty low on a lot of the draft boards. He should last to day 3, if not further. And that's a guy that went to Westlake High School, Drew Brees'
right.
high school, Nick Foles' high school. Is that a guy that you can see on the target board for Loomis and Payton?
Okay, the thing you have to understand too is both quarterbacks are really under 1-year deals. Jameis is, and they're not picking up those 2 years that they threw on the back end of Taysom Hill. Okay, Taysom would have to turn into Tom Brady for you to pick up those 2 last years. And I think Sean likes that sort of role at quarterback that can do a couple different things. Sam brings you that element. You walk up, he's a big man. He's not a small cat, and he can run the football well. He's a little erratic throwing the football, and I came close to picking him. But Sean has talked about one quarterback this offseason in college, Notre Dame's Ian Book. Went on Dan Patrick's show now. Okay, Dan just threw out a question. Who sort of reminds you a little bit of you as a quarterback and the skill set and everything else? Immediately, not any hesitation, he said, Ian Book from Notre Dame. Man, he's scrappy. I like the way he plays. It went ding, ding, ding for me. Uh-oh. Cat's out. Meow. The cat's out the bag on this one. He's telling you without telling you that he has spent some time with Ian Book watching that. Okay? And Notre Dame, really good football team the last couple of years. Ian's a little bit erratic as a passer, similar to Sam. I see mechanically with Ian, when he throws the football, he's always falling back. It's as though somebody takes a shot at him and he's trying to get out of the way. That's a habit he had in high school. I bet he was hit a lot. And it's hard to break, even though he got protected great at Notre Dame. Man, he had some big guys up front. Those guys were literally the 5 granite players, and he had those big tight ends. But there is something there when Sean starts to name a player. There's something there when he starts that. And the fact that he did it without hesitation tells you even more.
It's the telltale right there.
It's fresh on his brain Saturday. Yep.
It's kind of to throw the ace card out. Okay, you got something there. And so, and he loves project players. And Ian's a really good runner. He isn't as thickly built as Taysom Hill or as Sam is, but he's a good movement guy. He's a winner. He's tough. He fits a role. And so I've never believed the Davis Mills story that they would pick him late in round 1. I've watched Mills, who was a tremendous high school quarterback, multiple injuries at Stanford. Okay, I'm going to ask you, if anybody watched Stanford, was there one game that Mills looked great? The answer is no. So I'm going to pick him in round 1 off of a workout? Come on. That's his agent. I know I get emails and texts every day from agents telling me how great their players are. But they sell it to one national guy, and then somebody off the internet picks it up, and it's a story and everything else. Kyle Trask got a lot more on the resume. And he's an interesting player. He's a big man, gritty, tough, can make all the NFL throws. But he has got no movement skills. LSU sort of exposed that a little bit when they played him. When he was great when he had time to throw, but when they put pressure on him and he had to move, he wasn't the same guy. He was great against Alabama, who got zero pressure on him. He goes in a bowl game against Oklahoma. They put all kind of pressure. He was El Stinko. He played bad. Didn't play well at all. So I think we're in a league where we're seeing the die-off of the pro-style in-the-pocket quarterback. There's still one guy standing, and that's Brady. But think about it throughout the years. The 2 Mannings, Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees. You got Brady, you got Matt Ryan in Atlanta. But everybody else now got movement skills. And here's what worries me, and it's the biggest worry I have about Mac Jones from Alabama, who I think is a really good player. But when you can't get away from pressure, you take a lot of big hits, and it starts to physically take its toll on you. Look what it does Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he's getting beat up because he really can't get out of the way. We saw with Drew, he got hit. Now, Father Time is starting to play its toll in there. But it's something a couple years back, Peyton Manning told me. He said, I'm never worried about losing arm strength as I get older. He said, my biggest concern is from the waist down, being able to get away from pressure. And he said, man, when they get you, you get roughed up pretty good. And your body doesn't respond the same. And so as we get older, is it our arms or our elbow or our shoulder that bothers us? Or is it problems with our legs and knees and ankles? Equate that to playing that position. That's what sort of ends it for a quarterback as he gets old. It's not so much the arm strength. It's the power that you generate from your lower body to help you make that throw. And then you take some hits. And when you get it, and, you can't brace for a 300-pound guy falling on you. There is no brace for that. And so that concerns me about Kyle Trask. It concerns me certainly about Mac, that they're going to take some big hits playing in the NFL and not being able to get away. You look at some of the other guys, that are hitting this league today. If it's, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, they all can run.
Franks, yeah.
They can all get away from, and even Franks, as you brought up, Franks is a big, tall cat, but he can, man, once he gets like one or two steps, he got it rolling with him. The game is changing because it's not all about edge pressure anymore. Defenses are now coming at you from the middle. They feel as though it's disruptive more because it takes away your launch pad. Drew had explained it to Bobby and I, even though Bobby is much more experienced with it being a former quarterback. He says, if you got edge pressure, all I can do is sidestep. I take one step up in the pocket. I'm in the launch pad. I can throw it. If I got a guy coming at me like this, I'm like, I can't take that step up. So either I'm in reverse or I'm moving east and west, and it affects your accuracy skills. But the young guys today, they're played in those systems where they're running and throwing off the move. It's all off the waggle. And so it's a different world. But for the pocket quarterback, in the two games the Saints played against Brady, what did they steal? They didn't let him step up. They refused to let him step up. And when he did, there was somebody there. So, I got to hold it.
He never got in his comfort. He never got in his comfort zone. Never got in his comfort zone.
So Arians was smart enough to figure this out, along with Leftwich, that, hey, listen, let's take some of the pressure off of Tom. Let's start running the football. Okay, it's old-fashioned, but didn't they win for him? They played great run defense, and they ran the football with Fournette. Okay? And for Leonard, that ball ain't heavy. Just give it to me. I got it. So I do think as much as we change offensively and defensively, what still wins in this league? The ability to run the football when you need to and have to, and you got to stop the run. Every year when we do the Louisiana line camp at Nicholls State, I get a chance to sit down with a number of the NFL defensive line coaches. One of them is Ryan Nielsen with the Saints. And he always tells me, hey, before you ask me about a pass rush, my first question I want to talk about is run defense. Because if we don't stop the run, we in big trouble. And again, you would think with everything happening with 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, everything being spread out, that would be the main concern. But for defensive line coaches and coordinators today, stop the run is still number one. It's still the biggest priority area when you're coaching defense.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, before we wrap, I want to just get one quick question from you. Who do you think is the Saints quarterback under center this season?
That's easy. It's Jameis Winston. I think that those cards have been played. And I understand why Sean says this is an open competition because, you made promises to Taysom and you want it to be a fair deal. But it would be a shock to me that if Taysom is starting game one, I think it's Jameis Winston's job, and it's his job to lose. And Sean has always liked Winston, even when he came out of Florida State, even though they had no shot to pick him. He went to the workout. He spoke very highly of Jameis. And so what I'm interested in Jameis is, can Sean take the sander and get out some of the rough spots in his game? One of the things, I worked years ago with Hank Stram at WWL, and I asked Hank what was the big factor in a quarterback. And he said, people make mistakes. And he said, it's the hardest thing to gauge, but his quick twitch memory skills of knowing where to go to football, knowing where you got to go with it downfield, and understanding what the defenses give you. And he said, that's just a handful of guys that can do it at the highest level. Just a handful. The rest of them, it's arm talent. Now, that's the thing with Jameis. He brings you that to the table. He's got great arm talent. All his life, he's relied on that shotgun to get that ball in a tight window. But it's been hit and miss. You've had great games with Winston, other games not so well, and he's been hot and cold in games. But he gives the Saints something they have not had the last couple of years. That's the ability to throw deep downfield. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think this football team will look to get a speed receiver, because now you've got a guy that can get him the football. And I think they like Marquez Callaway and what he brought to the table last year. Mike had the injuries, but they would, I think, look strongly at a guy that can stretch the defense, stretch the envelope, the rubber band, and that gets that safety out the box. Because the Saints were seeing a lot of that with Drew. They knew that, because of the injuries and the arm issues as you get older, that he couldn't throw the football real deep downfield. He was still accurate throwing the football in that 15 to 18, 20-yard range, but it was the real deep ball ability that he didn't have. You lose it, okay? He just couldn't generate the power from the lower body anymore to get the ball deeper downfield like he did early in his career to Devery and Robert Meacham. So God robbed him, not so much the arm strength, because he never really had that great arm, but it robbed him of the power from the waist down. And that's what happens to quarterbacks. And I'm glad Peyton actually admitted that to me, that was a major concern for him, because he had been through shoulder injuries, everything else. And he said, the big difference today is, man, when I crank back to throw it, it's nothing but arm. That power in that lower body's not there. We saw it happen to Brett Favre. We saw it happen to Eli Manning. So it robs you of the power, also robs you of your ability to get away from a heavy pass rush. Yeah, you can't move as well.
It's going to be a fun draft. It's going to be a fun season. I know you're going to keep us up to date on everything. And I want to tell you again, thank you for so much for joining us on Fleurs Truly again. So many of our listeners really loved the last show, kept asking, when are you going to get Mike back on? I said, closer to the draft, because I know you do your draft report every year, and we're 2 weeks out. So we're super excited. So thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Everybody can pick up a copy of Mike's draft guide on MikeDetillier.com. And of course, they can follow you at Mike Detillier on Twitter. So thank you so much again for joining us. And Jeff and I really appreciate it. We'll have you come on back on closer to the season and kind of, see where we're at that point. Once we see those, I call them my project players and hidden gems in training camp. I always pick one or two players that is on nobody's radar, and I like to talk about them and see where they wind up. And a lot of times they make the team, so it's kind of fun and exciting. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Always my pleasure. And,
yes,
anytime
definitely.
Y'all need me, I'm here.
Great. And as always, you can catch us on Twitter. I'm Tina at the NOLA Girl. You can catch us on Facebook with Fleurs Truly Podcast, and as well on Instagram and Twitter with Fleurs Truly. And Jeff, tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter and Facebook as well.
You'll find me on Twitter at the NOLA Rolla. That's where you'll find me there. And of course, you can go on Facebook and find me at the Fleurs Truly Podcast page. If that doesn't help you find me, I can't help you there.
And again, thank you to all our listeners, and we hope you have a wonderful week, and we will see you again next Tuesday on Fleurs Truly.
See you next time.